Hello, this is Cho of the Shiny Colors Discord, and welcome to the first of hopefully many videos that we title the Shiny Review. In this video, we'll be going over current or previous banners, and talk about all the relevant cards in the banner or any events that are running at the same time as a banner. Today we'll be talking about the Bitter and Sweet Halloween banner, which is up for a few more days as of the time of this recording, talking about the PSSR3 Chioko, SSSR4 Mamimi, as well as the event SSSR4 Tenka. So, let's go ahead and get things started. Starting, of course, with the PSSR3 Chioko, Kake Mazetara Milk. Sorry if I butcher the pronunciation. Not my strong suit. So, wrapping up Hokago's third PSSR set, the limited Nuts Choco Jelly is complete with the latest Chioko. This falls in line with one of the previous Natsuha support cards, as for the Nuts Choco Jelly, and it also works out that all three of those cards happen to have a limited PSSR that all focus on one single stat. Juri's second SSR focuses on vocal, and Natsuha's third SSR focuses on visual. Chioko sports one of the hardest hitting single target appeals in the game at her peak, alongside an extremely hard hitting memory appeal to seal the deal. She decided to take the third stat and go full into dance, and we'll go into why this card is ridiculous in just a moment. So, this Chioko is very versatile and can complement both Hokago and general unit builds due to her effects. And again, go into those in just a moment. Her only weakness is you won't have access to her full potential unless you fully limit Breaker, so go ahead and defeat those judges for the sake of your friend Chioko. Her roles are Buffer, Center, and Nuker. Her initial skill is a Dance 3.0 appeal with a Dance 0.4 and Dance 2.0 appeal that scales based on her attention up, as well as a Dance 56% buff for 3 turns after using the skill. And if you happen to have all the other Hokago members active as you use this skill, you get the Link appeal, which is an additional Dance 0.6 to 3.0 appeal, again, depending on how high your attention is. This is extremely powerful, as you are looking at base, a Dance 8.0 at max, as well as a Dance 56% buff. Once you upgrade her to a max limit break, that scale goes up to 4.0, keeps the same scaling on the attention, and now has an 82% dance buff, and the Link appeal is upgraded to 0.8 to 4.0. Now, as for the scalings, as we have learned, every single unit in the game starts at 100% attention in an audition. And how this scale works is that for every additional 100% attention you have, this skill goes up by the appropriate value. So the initial appeal, the 0.4, goes up by 0.4 every 100%, the Link appeal goes up by 0.6, and the max Link appeal goes up by 0.8. So maximizing the amount of attention you have can increase the overall amount of damage this card does, and makes it extremely powerful under the right circumstances. As for the rest of this card's abilities, her 1-star skill is a Dance 21% buff if your mental is 75% or higher, has a 40% activation rate, and 1 overall use per run. And her 2-star skill is a Dance 80% up, as well as mental damage 100%, which means that you take 100% more damage for the turn if the turn count is greater than 4, has a 20% activation rate, and can activate up to twice. Overall, both of these passives are extremely useful and makes Chioko, again, really consistent at being able to do damage at any point in the game, having access to a 21% buff early and an 80% buff late. Obviously, the mental damage is a bit of a risk, but if you choose to avoid that, this card essentially comes with virtually no downsides for any team. Now, as for the recommended supports, as obviously you want to build this card to be as strong as possible, definitely focus on attention, 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 and dance. Stack up as many passives that bolster your attention as possible, and of course consider any buffing appeals from 4-star supports if you lack additional Chioko copies for her own 4-star appeal. I recommend highly the limited SSR Juri, who is fully focused on dance and has attention-based passives, the SSR original Dance Mamimi, who has a Dance 100% passive as well as 100% attention up, the initial SSR Meguru, who has great abilities to buff dance as well as a great dance buffing appeal, the limited SSR Mono, with amazing dance passives as well as a dance appeal that focuses on dual stat, but works out for the best anyway, as well as the SR Rinze, who has a relatively high dance passive as well as useful skills overall for Hokago. If you lack any of these cards, the newest SSR Mamimi is a great choice if you do not have the original Mamimi. If you have initial SSR Natsuha, her 35% dance buff as well as dance 3.5 appeal is very useful. The initial SR Jury, if you lack limited Jury, still is impactful to this day with a 40% dance passive, as well as a dance 2.5 and 20% dance buff. And lastly, surprisingly enough, is SR Asahi, who comes with a very reasonable dance 30% buff as long as you have a dance up on you actively, which a lot of Hokago cards will give you access to, meaning that it is a relatively easy buff to activate when you need it. Overall, I would rate this card on 2 roles. Since it is a produce card, you have to look at it from 2 facets. 1 as a general use unit, and 2 as a center. Centers mostly focus on the memory appeal, which is what we'll talk about now. And all I have to really say is that a maximum Dance 6.0 memory appeal is no joke in the current meta, especially when you consider how powerful Hokago passives have been. And of course, Hokago makes this 6.0 much more consistent than any other team due to the fact that they have a lot of passives that focus on attention. And as for general use, I also rate this unit extremely high, both with double S. Ignoring the memory appeal for a moment, having a card with access to a Dance 5.0 and 6.0 without the full Hokago lineup is extremely useful, especially when you consider that you also get a 56% or 82% dance buff for 3 turns afterwards. She's fantastic for single stat dance teams that can really use a helping hand. Moving on, we have the limited support SSR, Kimagure no Megumi, Mamimi Tanaka. This card kind of operates as the antithesis of Sleepover Baby Jury, the limited SSR. If Sleepover Baby Jury's focus is on high attention and high dance buffs, this card is low attention, high dance. This card exists to make sure that you don't explode for following your game plan in the case of Antika, and brings along some very powerful passives that signals a slight shift in Antika builds. So, for pros and cons, she's very useful in production thanks to Dance Mastery SP and Unit Mastery SP. As it works out, Dance Mastery SP is very simple. As long as she is in the dance room and you work with her, you will get additional SP. This is an extremely high value because it is a limited SSR, meaning that you actually earn enough SP from this to justify not using the typical SP room. Especially when you combine this with Unit Mastery SP, which is +5 for every Antika member in the room. Meaning at max, if you're producing an Antika card and have every member in the room, including this Mamimi, it's +20. That's a lot of SP for just one room, especially if you happen to get a perfect in the room, which doubles the amount of SP you would be earning alongside the amount of dance. Extremely good. When you pair this up with other cards such as the SR Sakuya, the amount of SP you earn skyrockets and makes her extremely good at building high passive value, high stat, high effectiveness units. And of course, because this is a limited card, she comes with additional dance uncaps for +175, which on one card is heavenly. Saves you on so much SP, which you almost don't even need to worry about with how effective this card is at earning you SP. Also has a Dance 100% up passive, which is extremely powerful in the current meta, one of the highest raw value passives in the game thus far, tied with her previous iteration. Now as for some cons, her 4-star appeal does reduce your mental by 30% on use, despite being extremely powerful, which is really only useful for Antika builds, and maybe the niche Hokago builds. And of course, because there is already a Dance Mamimi that has been extremely impactful, there's a real sense of competition between those two cards, with one of those being a permanent card that many people may have already maxed, so it can be hard to justify using this card over the former. Now as for her skills, at 1 star she unlocks a Dance 30% up and mental damage 20% damage cut if your mental is 74% or lower, has a 10% chance to activate, and can activate up to 3 times per run. Her 2-star passive is a Dance 100% up, as well as Attention 20% down as long as your mental is 49% or lower, with a 30% activation rate and 1 chance per run. Both of these combined together are extremely good, and really, again, complements what Antika wants to do. They want to have high base values on their numbers, they want to not immediately explode to a judge that looks at them, and they don't want to really be attacked anymore due to some of the newer Antika cards focusing on attention down. Her 3-star uncap is a Dance +100, paired up with her other 3 skills for Dance +25, again equating to that 175, and her 4-star is a Dance 4.0 appeal that reduces your own mental by 30% on use, and also reduces your attention by 30% for 3 turns. This skill is fantastic, but has one big problem. Antika really doesn't grab any other secondary skill other than the SR Sakuya for stalling purposes. So this skill doesn't have an amazing amount of value for most teams, but if the Sakuya ever falls out of favor, this skill is a fantastic backup. Overall, I'd rate this card a SS, as if original Dance Mamimi wasn't enough for teams, limited Mamimi leaves just as much of an impact with her Dance 100% passive, with a stronger secondary effect for Antika. Much more useful in that regard compared to the original, but the original is still very good for most other teams that want to be below half health. As for her masteries, they also compound for some of the most SP gain in one room if your luck is high or EX skills are on point. Lastly, we have the event SSR Twinkle Twinkle Tenka Osaki. In one of the most interesting story events so far, which I definitely recommend you read up on if you can, Tenka gallops onto the scene with her 4th support SSR. Unfortunately for Tenka, she's an event SSR, meaning her overall power and impact is relatively low, and has not a lot of use outside of Alstromeria teams, which even then is hard to justify. She makes up for this shortcoming with a fairly useful production passive, however, and at least the art is super cool. Positives is that she has a Dance 3.5 appeal for dance-centered teams, which is useful. Also has Audition Mastery Dance with a cap of 8, which means you can now run an all-stats audition-only run in Wing. So if you want to have the crazy build where you do 32 auditions the entire time, no lessons whatsoever, no resting, mental, dance, vocal, visual, and SP are all covered now thanks to this Tenka. Now, as for downsides, this Tenka does have a gimmicky passive that doesn't really work to any team's benefit outside of Alstromeria, and she's kind of a hard sell against any other Tenka support, really. So, as for her skills, she has a Dance plus 18% if the unit position is Dance, which means this will only activate in FES, cannot activate in production runs. Has a 30% activation rate, 1-time maximum. Her 2-star skill is a mental 10% recovery if the turn count is equal to or less than 6, has a 30% activation chance, 1 time per run, a Dance 50% uncap as per all event SSRs, and her final 4-star appeal is a Dance 0.7, however it turns into a Dance 3.5 if you hit perfect. Overall, I would rate this card a B if you are planning to run her on not Alstromeria, and A+ if she is on Alstromeria. The downfall of Event Tenka is her 2-star passive, which gives up a precious slot of potential damage in favor of health regen. This really provides no immediate benefit to any team other than Alstromeria, since no other team really wants to be at maximum HP, other than Alstro. And of course this works completely against what Antika wants to do. And as previously mentioned, there are a lot other Tenka supports that are much more impactful for this one, making it really hard to justify picking this one over any of the previous. And with that, we're at the end of the video. Thank you everybody for tuning in. We plan to do our best to get more events up as we can, more cards as possible, and we'll probably work our way backwards in order to go over some of the other cards that have been extremely useful, or if you just want to know how some cards have been, we'll do our best to deliver that info to you. So, if you would like to follow the Shiny Colors Discord for immediate updates, as well as join in on the discussion on the rating of cards, you can hop over to the link in the description below. Or if you would like to help contribute or check out the Shiny Colors Wiki, which we also run, the link is also in the description. Have a wonderful day, and hopefully we'll see you next time.